Hey everyone, welcome to At the Root of It. And today we have Jared back on. We're going to be
Mhm.
talking about truth. So I know the audience has already met you, Jared, but in case we have anybody who's maybe tuning in and hearing you for the first time, if you want to give a quick overview of your perspective that may help illuminate the direction we take this conversation and what your perspective is when we discuss truth.
Hmm. Well, first off, thanks for having me again on a admittedly heavier topic of truth than the first time. Um, I suppose I'll say, I Anisha and I are colleagues, and in some ways, I would say she's definitely been a mentor for me at the company that we both work for. I'm an engineer on the operations team, sort of the greater operations org. And then personally, I dive a lot, and I'll stop there because I'll use our whole hour if I keep talking about it. So we'll leave it at that, and we'll see where this goes.
Awesome. So I know when we initially discussed this topic, there was it's a lot to unpack. There's a lot of different directions that we can take truth. But let's maybe start with how truth was framed early on. So maybe let's start with your childhood. What was the first impression you had of truth? Was it as a child not being told to lie? Or what did it look like for you?
Not the question I thought you were going to ask me. Oh man, yeah, I'd say maybe three things. Yes, that like not to lie, but I think that's something that any parent ideally, right, tries to teach their child is, hey, it's not okay to lie. I think I learned that lesson the way every child does. You try it for the first time and it fails. Um, and so you either never do it again or you try to get better at concealing it. Um, and then I think I also learned, I think I had a very, maybe a weird adjective to use for family, but like empirical approach to things. I did well in school. My parents encouraged learning. And so I think I always associated truth with like things I was learning or things that were objectively observable, things that I saw in my lived experience um, were true. That like there were certain fundamentals of things that were true. And so you didn't question that.
Got it.
That kind of bit me in the butt though, because I would push back against those things too. Uh, for listeners who don't know, Hanish and I almost started a podcast in 2021, though it was an idea that I had at the time that was completely unrelated to what you're doing now and not as good. It was on this idea that when I did push back on things, mostly because I didn't like authority as a kid. Surprise, surprise, what teenage boy doesn't? My mom used to just always tell me, like, well, that's life according to you. And it was like, that was just kind of her way of like dismissing me and whatever antics, whatever kind of bullshit I was trying to spew at the time. So, on the one hand, like I had a healthy respect for, again, what I'd say like what I would call empirical things now, like the sciences, mathematics, like things I was learning. But then when it came to uh, authority figures or especially teachers, sometimes like the things they would say or do, that's where I tried to push the boundaries a little bit.
Interesting. Yeah, I think for me, it probably was maybe more so of a perspective of what truths I wasn't allowed to talk about. My
Mm,
family did a lot of, uh, I guess, masking to kind of hide some of the problems that were happening at home. So I, I guess, at an early age, learned that I'm not supposed to talk about those things. I'm not supposed to allude to that my family's having problems. And so I don't know, maybe then from a young age I was encouraged to lie in that capacity or specifically for not airing like the family's dirty laundry. And so I became very attached also to like academic truths, like science and math. Those were very elegant, very clean. Didn't necessarily feel like there was subjectivity in it. And so I maybe that's part of the reason now that I think about it that I was so interested in science as a kid. But when it came to like at home and then even with my friendships, I would trust easily. And I think it was because I wanted to believe that, I mean, I guess this sounds a bit cliche to say as a child, was like, I wanted to believe everyone was good and that I could trust people. And I think maybe if there's anything my childhood taught me in a more trauma based space was that I couldn't trust other people. I couldn't trust authority. I couldn't trust my parents because they were the ones who were supposed to take care of me. And I wasn't taken care of as much as I could have been. And so maybe that's where like the lack of trust started stemming. And that took a while to undo too.
That's interesting. The way what I hear out of that, there's many things, but is maybe a difference between you and me is you were taught very early and maybe even shown, right? You were modeled this to, in a way, almost like protect the truth and then protect yourself from it to where you wouldn't let other people see it and you wouldn't talk about it, you wouldn't reveal it. And maybe contrast that with myself and my family, my upbringing. It very much wasn't like that. And that doesn't mean that people don't have secrets, and my parents didn't keep certain corners of their life, away from me. But generally speaking, I would say in our family, especially as my brother and I got older and my brother got into some crazy stuff, like it became almost more open than a lot of people are comfortable with. Like the amount that my mom and dad and myself will share amongst each other, I think is abnormal, both around like my wife's family, if we're around our extended family. I think I get the sense, no one's ever said this, that like at this point they're like, well, you guys almost overshare. And I think it comes from things my parents have had to unpack about themselves and then about their relationship with my brother. And I think I've just kind of latched onto that. And as I've gotten older and gotten closer with my family, there's almost nothing that needs to be hidden. It's just so much easier to be like, why are we dancing around these things? Whatever that is, let's just talk about it.
Were there truths in the past that would be hard to name and are now something that's easier to name? Or is there even truths in the past that are still really hard to talk about today?
Mm, that would be a good question for the four of us sitting here. Because I think if we're including my brother and my parents, they'd give you a different answer. I think today the answer would be no. There's not anything that's too difficult to talk about, um, or to name. That doesn't mean it's not hard, but there's no concealing anything anymore.
That's pretty, honestly, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah. I don't know how much more I would add to that. It's like when I'm with my parents, I find at least one or two nights, if I see them, say for a week or so, we'll stay up late and just talk. And it's not always about traumatic experiences. It's not always about, oh, well, mom, you said this when I was 5 and I've never let you live it down. It's not always about stuff like that. But it could start with talking about wellness. It could start with, God forbid, politics. It could start with anything. Usually with my family, it kind of evolves into this exploration of what we think, but why we think what we think and how our experiences have shaped those beliefs and why not to make this super political, but I am different than my parents in that regard. And it has been touchy at times, but it's also been safe enough for us to like almost butt heads a little bit because we're both going like, help me understand why you believe that, where that's coming from. And then what makes it really interesting is we have the ability as a family to go, well, dad, like you believe this thing about, let's just say immigration as a topic, right? It's a big one right now. And I can say, well, dad, like based on how I have seen you throughout my life, it doesn't match that you would believe this because I don't see you as someone like
Mm.
who feels this way, right? About like people, you know? So it's challenging someone and exploring like, well, how did you come to that? Because you don't strike me as someone who just, is like anti-human or something like that. I know I'm being very vague, probably to
Yeah,
respect my parents, but like the point is there's a lot of safety in those conversations.
safety, but I think what even feels more important than that, because it seems like the foundation for everything else, is curiosity.
Very much.
There's a just a genuine desire to understand other perspectives and also question assumptions, because sometimes many of those truths are based on assumptions. And so approaching it from a sense of curiosity instead of this binary black and white view of the world.
Yeah, and I would add to that something that I try to I try to model. I don't always get this right, but seeking to something that goes with this is like seeking to understand rather than correct. And this is a
Mm.
very big, this can be a big deal for folks in leadership or in mentorship positions or for parents even. There's a time and a place to tell somebody they're wrong, but we don't convince people just by, well, frankly, I mean, as unfortunate as it is, we don't convince people just by facts alone. Everyone has a lived experience. And so if you're really going to try to persuade someone or convince them, or they've done something wrong, they might know that they did something wrong. And so they have shame or guilt or whatever feelings about it. You have to start with understanding before you can redirect or before you can correct.
Mm.
That's what I hear in that with curiosity is like, yeah, my I think my parents and I are human. If we're arguing about something, there's a small part of us that's like, oh, I got to win or like I got to show you my side. Especially me, I'll admit, like I am like that. But I recognize that and so I have to go, wait a second, hold on. Like let me try and understand where they're coming from, but also break down what's at the root of what they're saying. Where's the division here? Is it just we disagree with each other, or is there another crux of this argument that we're missing? So yeah, I don't know. Maybe we've gotten off the, the original
No,
question.
I mean what you mentioned actually is also directly applicable even to like friendships and relationships, because how much of it is being in the heat of the moment, like misunderstanding based on an assumption, perhaps, what the other person is saying, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, are we talking about what actually happened, or are we now debating what you think happened?
What your memory of it was,
Exactly.
which is
And
not
then,
always reliable.
which we're all unreliable narrators. Everybody is unreliable narrators. And so our perspective is drastically shifted by, I mean, some level of self-awareness. Yes. Like there's definitely times I've been noted for tone and I'm like, okay, yeah, yeah, I probably could have said that a different way. Uh and so, we're that kind of
I've been
feedback
around for
even,
that.
yeah, feedback happens also in the workplace where someone will say like, oh, like so and so was really curt or abrasive, and it's like, okay. But I wonder, and something that's been kind of challenging me lately is how much empathy or understanding or curiosity are we approaching in those people in those situations to understand, okay, yeah, they may have not said something the right way, the best way, insert adjective, but why might that be? Why did it not come out right? Was it they've been sleep deprived, they have a newborn at home and they haven't been able to focus? And it's not an excuse, mind you, but it's perspective on what their view of the world is right now as a sleep deprived parent.
Something I will learn in 6 months' time. Just drop that in there. I don't have a good answer to that because I think what you're getting at is something that's like very fundamentally human. Um, it's two things can be true at once. Something that I hear a lot and I believe is like it can be true that you were abrasive, and it can be true that you were up all night with a newborn who was throwing up, and you're on your fifth cup of coffee, and like, yeah, your fuse is going to be shorter. And I don't know what you do with that, right? Like you shouldn't be punished because you're just trying to get through the day, and let's just use you as an example, right? You're doing what is arguably the hardest job in the world, which is being a mom in your case, if that was your situation. But at the same time, you can't, like you said, it's not an excuse to just treat people like shit, right? So what do you do with that? And I think the answer, frankly, is I don't know. It's two things can be true at once, and you're that's the dynamic part of a relationship. Like being married for as long as I have been, you just don't get that right all the time. And that's what being in relationship is like, well, how do I navigate this? Because I want to be able to tell my partner or tell my friend or whatever, hey, I didn't really like the way you said that to me, and I don't think that's right or nice, but I see what you're going through.
Yeah. And you know what? I think, besides obviously hopefully having the skills as an individual to know that you're feeling overwhelmed and that you may not be responding in your best, and being able to possibly, if you can, in some way advertise that, like, hey, I'm going through a lot, I apologize in advance if I end up being short, I'm a little sleep deprived. But the other side of that is the person who receives it, don't don't make assumptions. Like, ask a little bit more questions, like, hey, is everything okay? That doesn't sound like you. But I don't know, I've noticed more and more lately there's a lack of maybe that empathy and understanding of just like, oh, that didn't seem normal. Is everything okay? Like, just genuinely, is everything okay? And there's also, depending on the workplace, depending on the coworkers, like, there's also people who prefer keeping work and life separate. And I mean, that'll drastically change the calculus of how transparent you can be if you feel like that's not going to be received. I mean, depending on the company environment that you in, it could be incredibly regulated where you just come in and you do your work and you go home, and then you don't really get to have personal conversations besides the occasional like office gossip. And that means nobody really knows that you could be behind on your rent or really struggling because your parent is sick. There's a whole host of things, but I don't know how much of that empathy, I keep coming back to that, but just like, I'll rephrase, like, curiosity. How curious are we really about who we're interacting with and the struggles that they may be going through? What are their truths that they're not able to vocalize maybe right now?
Yeah, maybe to try and tie this back to the first question about something I learned, that if you'd asked me when I was, let's say, 18 or in my 20s, I don't think I would have been able to articulate this, but I do think this is true. Let me see if I can put these thoughts together. Like, I grew up in a family and thankfully with friendships where there, I would say overall, not, not every single time, but generally speaking, there wasn't any topic that was off limits. And it was generally better to tell the truth or to just
Hmm.
say what was true. What were you feeling? What were you thinking in that moment? And then sort of ask for forgiveness after that. If you were wrong or you did something incorrect, it's like, well, this is what I was doing or this is what I was thinking. And if you're going to punish me for it, then like, all right, we'll work through that. And at work, you were talking about work and how some people have this work life balance. They keep certain things private. You don't really show your full true self sometimes in certain instances. And I won't say that I don't do that. I think that it's very real that you have to judge what's appropriate in a given moment with a given person. Like, how much should I share? Having said that, I learned in growing up and in the relationships I've had that it's always better, not necessarily to overshare, but it never hurts to just be honest. And so ultimately, if someone doesn't understand you, it doesn't hurt you to say, hey, man, I know I was acting like an asshole. Like, my baby's been up and crying and we had to go to the emergency room at 4 a.m. And like, this just sucks. And if that person still wants to be upset with you and doesn't care or whatever it is, honestly, that's their problem. So I think I texted you last night about topics for the podcast. And I said vulnerability. This is the flip side of that. It's incredibly hard to be vulnerable, but that is a very pure expression, I think, of truth or of someone's lived experience is vulnerable. How vulnerable can you be with people you don't know, with people in positions of power over you, with people who have hurt you? How vulnerable can you be? And I think that the more vulnerable you can get, the more comfortable you can get sort of bearing it and laying it out. It doesn't always feel good, but I always like having most, if not all, my cards on the table. Hey, this is where I'm at. I don't know the answer to this, or I don't feel like doing this, or I don't like the way you said that to me, whatever it is. And I don't have to be rude about that, but
Exactly.
here's my cards. I'm giving you all my cards. Now what? And I think people would find it's disarming in a sense to people that are
It
angry
is.
or upset. If you're just real with them, you generally can get that same thing back.
You know, two things kind of really struck me about what you said, this idea of just putting it out there, but also like the fact that your approach to this has been very much based off of what you've experienced in your childhood about just being honest and putting it out there. The first that I'll pick up is, it's the idea that oversharing is too much is really fascinating to me because especially now having completed this quarter of school and this leadership class I was taking, so much of who you are shows up in the workplace regardless if you intend to or not. Like I made a joke about this at one of my uh advice giving things at work, but we don't live on the severed floor. Like who you are at work is who you are at home. You don't have a completely separate personality. So whether or not you choose to disclose something about your life and who you are and what your lived experiences are, they still show up in the workplace. They just have no context anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you want to give people context, you can give people context, but guess what happens? If you don't give people context, they will make their own story. And I tell a lot of people this, if you want to be in control of the narrative, you have to be the one to tell the story. You have to be the one to give the context. Otherwise, they will go write their own stories and you may not like what they have to say.
Yeah, and if you don't know that person's going to write their own story about you or about something you said or did, and it's going to be based on their experiences, their perception of you. Maybe you remind them of someone they met in school, and so they're sort of pattern matching you, because the brain is excellent at what? Pattern matching and solving problems. So if someone doesn't know the context, they will make context.
Exactly.
And, you know, at the end of the day, we can't control that. I mean, we do that too. We're human as well. So we make assumptions and judgments about people and things. I guess I'm making it sound easy, but I guess then my response to that is, then why not just show your cards? Like, you can make a judge. You're going to judge my reaction to this, however you're going to judge it, but at least you know my cards. Here's where I'm coming from. If you still think that I'm crazy or whatever, then okay. But you know where I stand or how I arrived here.
And you and I talked about control in the last episode. This is one of the levers that you can have to control the narrative that's said about you, is be mindful of sharing your cards, sharing your context, sharing your life experiences, because it, to the right person, and I mentioned that carefully, it's like, to the right person, they will understand the nuance and they will understand more about you as a result. To the wrong person, they may not be in that space. They may not be prepared to hear that. And that's not necessarily on you either. They'll just disregard it and make their own stories anyway. But then you also end up attracting the right type of relationships, the right type of friendships, by simply being more of yourself. And the people who stick around are the ones who are receptive to that. And the other thread
Yeah.
I wanted to pick up from what you were mentioning about just being willing to even come out there with all the cards as being something that comes from your childhood. Because for me, I would say the complete opposite was true.
Mm-hmm.
So much of my life has been presenting without showing my cards, because if I give somebody my cards, they have power over me now.
Mm.
That was what my perception was, because every time, I've been hurt a couple of times in childhood from friends who would take information I gave them and somewhat use it against me. And obviously we're all children, so like, not fair to necessarily judge the actions of a child, but for me, is being perceptive to like, oh, okay, like this is what the world is like, and this, no one's correcting that. I don't necessarily have parents who are modeling the best example, and so I'm taking it from other areas of my environment. So if I have friends that start doing that, I'm like, oh, I can't trust anybody. That's just the way the world works. I can't trust authority, so I guess I'm on my own. And that's where my truth developed, that the only person who can take care of me is myself. Which, to be fair, is still a fair value to have. But when it becomes kind of toxic is when it's more from the sense of like hyper independence, where you don't rely on anybody because you refuse to trust anybody. And that took decades to unwrap. And I didn't really even start doing that until I moved to the Bay Area and was away from my family life and got to explore what it means not having to worry about anybody's perceptions about who I am based on my family, because nobody knows my family anymore. So it was almost like I could turn into a new person, which is probably why my PTSD started somewhere like around there, because I just disassociated and became a different person.
Or you're the same person, but evolved.
Evolved, and also maybe even, I think my therapist would be inclined to say, like, free of that burden,
Mm-hmm.
that was holding me back from getting a chance to be who I am, and live my own truth outside of the context of trauma.
I will say I'll respond to that, but I'll throw this out at the risk of like teasing further episodes. It will be fun to hear you tell that story now with your newfound perspective and your new trust of whether it's me, your friends, your audience, because you've learned to do that, but that story is still a part of you. Doesn't mean it has to define everything about you, but uh, yeah,
Yeah, but
be
I'll
interesting to hear you tell that story.
timing wise, that'll be in about 2 weeks from whenever anyone's hearing this. So stay tuned.
I you've used the word a couple times. You said trust. Um, and I think this is another place where you and I do differ a lot, or at least differ in how we were brought up and what we learned. Because I've never had anyone tell me this, but I get the sense that I trust people too easily, and it depends, of course, on what it is. Like if would I trust someone with to watch my child for a week or something like that. It's like there's only a handful of people that I would do that with. But I would say as a rule when it comes to sharing like things I'm struggling with, things I'm thinking about, you know, someone I'm having a problem with, someone I'm not, whatever it is, I generally err on the side of like I'll tell anybody anything they want to know because I don't feel like I have anything to lose. It's like I understand why people feel like they get burned when people betray their trust. And I haven't sat and thought about this, but if I thought about it hard enough, there could be someone in my life I could think of that betrayed my trust. Overall, though, I think I sort of correct the other way. And I just think, what does it hurt to just be honest, to just say, here's where I'm at, here's what I'm going through. And yeah, I don't know if that person can't handle it. If that person doesn't want to hear it, that's okay. No one's obligated to listen necessarily, so that's okay. Um, but I want people to take me in a way, maybe it's like I want people to take me at face value. Like I'm telling you the truth. I'm giving you my honest thoughts, and I just expect the same thing back. And that's it. And we'll go move forward from there. But that for some reason, be it my parents, my friendships growing up, whatever it is, for some reason that's just felt more natural. I don't know where I got it from. But if someone on the street walks up and is like, "Hey man, what are you struggling with?" I wouldn't necessarily have a problem being
Hmm.
like, "Well, if you really want to know, like, do you got like 30 minutes?"
I think it may not be necessarily your perspective on it, but the perspective I can offer on that is I feel like because so much of your, and I mean the general your like values as a like child are shaped by the environment that you're in, the people that you're surrounded with, your parents most especially. So much of your initial truths are their truths, are cultural truths, are societal truths that are framed by that environment. And so for me, a lot of those truths initially were based on being an immigrant, being being Indian, and what it meant to be in the US trying to succeed as that category. And then it became, you know, stereotypically or not, I think many Indians value a sense of accomplishment
Mm-hmm.
and pride in what they accomplish. And some of that, the other side of that, is competition. And it's competition with each other in some honestly kind of crazy and very dysfunctional ways. But it means that I was conditioned in some way to think that I had to be that competitive. That's what the
Mm.
truth that I inherited is that in order for me to be successful, I just It's not just about me being successful. Somebody else's perception needs to be that I am successful. And that's a very weird dynamic to then introduce, like, because then it means that your value is starting to be driven by what others think of you. And that's obviously a very slippery slope. And so I
Very
think
much.
I'm noticing that so much of my truths that I'm unwinding are other people's expectations or truths of what I should and should not do, whether it's the color of my skin, whether it's the fact that I'm a woman. There's a lot that's wrapped up in there. But I'm learning which of those are fair and which ones I want to hold on to and which ones are ridiculous and I'll toss, or which ones I've outgrown even, because we can also have a truth that we believe in similar to values as children or even as teenagers, even in our 20s, that especially once you're in your 30s and older, that will shift inevitably because of wisdom and life experiences.
So well said.
Has there been a moment though where there's been a cost to truth? I know that you're mentioning that in general it's something that you're willing to put out there. You don't think twice necessarily about putting that truth out there. But has there ever been a time or situations where maybe you'll think twice because there's a cost that you're not willing to pay to have that truth out there?
Yes, but with maybe with avoiding giving examples, the way I think about that question is it goes back to what I said about when certain things are appropriate. So, as a rule, I think honesty is the best policy, as they say. That doesn't mean, as we've kind of been dancing around, that like there's a bit of discernment you have to have with your audience, how you're going to deliver a message, you know. And so I think about that in the case of, yeah, there are times at work or in relationships where I want to be honest and I have to think, well, what's the appropriate way to go about this? Because a hard truth and just being flat out like, what's the word I'm looking for? Just perhaps raw, you know, it, that might not be the right way to go about it. And so, okay, let me find an appropriate time. Is this person ready to hear this? Um, what's this person feeling? How should I be cognizant of that and deliver this in a way that's like, hey, I want to respect your feelings, how you're feeling about this. So that's how I think about that. So yes, there have been times where I've gotten that wrong. And so there have been costs associated with it. But I don't think it's the cost of telling the truth. I think it's the cost of the delivery.
Mm, yeah, I can see that. I think I have seen cost mostly show up from the perspective of if the person who is going to be receiving this truth may not have the skills or the capacity to hear the truth. And at that point, I mean, depending on the relationship, depending on the person, like, I don't know if sometimes if I want to pay the cost because it may be damaging.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I think this is where I've seen myself understand the nuance of not necessarily thinking of everything as binary, as good or bad. Like, this is actually a good example of a white lie. Sometimes there is a better way to phrase it that's not the entire truth, whether you call it a white lie or a truth of omission, a whole bunch of different ways you can phrase that, but kind of the same package where it's some of the truth, not all of the truth, but enough of it perhaps to get a meaning across with the intention of, yeah, the other person may not understand the nuance if I explain the full truth. Probably most happens in common with like, um, there's definitely certain generations, certain cultures even that really value uh, having guests over and like making sure that they're comfortable, making sure they're fed. But if you go over and like this happens probably most often at like Thanksgiving or other like holidays where like you're trying to eat a little bit better or you're maybe on a diet or you have like some other food sensitivity and you don't want to have a whole conversation about it and explain yourself. but simply just go, "Oh, I'm thank you. I'm full already." And like not the truth, but it's the best way to convey the intention without hurting what they're trying to do, which is just take care of you.
That's interesting. That specific example too. I'm thinking if it were me, I yeah, I just don't feel like eating this. Haven't eaten this in a while. And then it's like it's on you if you want to ask any more questions. Like here's the truth. Do you want to know about my diet? Do you want to know about counting macros? Do you want to know about, the range of body fat percentage I'm trying to reach? I'll tell you. Most people don't care. And you're just, okay, well, the truth is like, I don't want to eat hamburgers anymore. Gonna ask? No? Okay, cool. Let's leave it there.
I think that might be one of those cultural things because I think in Asian households, that's a hard one to get away with.
Yeah. No, yeah, I know. Well, I can't say I know, but I can see how there's perhaps others in the audience that are just like, yeah, easy for you to say, dude.
I mean, there was a time where like I've said that before at other households where I was just like, "Oh no, like I'm trying to eat better and that's and that." And then like it ends up rabbit holing so much and like because I'm already introverted and I'm already feeling uncomfortable in those situations because it's not my like home environment, I'm just kind of like, "Oh, why did I do that? Like why did I just open up the can of worms? Why didn't I just say something else so that I shut down the entire line of conversations?" Maybe that's coming from more of that perspective.
And maybe too for me it's a bit I don't like to think of it as an insecurity, but maybe there is a bit there where like I feel weird about lying about it. If
Hmm.
I'm like there's no reason I should feel ashamed of this being the answer. If someone is offering me food cuz they're being nice, that's what makes them feel good, that's part of the culture. There's nothing wrong with that. And even acknowledging that, hey, I know you prepared this awesome meal. This is so good. I tried this and this. These things were awesome. This isn't really something I've been eating lately because I'm watching what I eat, but these other things you made were amazing. Like, thank you for hosting. And like trying to do both. It's like I'm not gonna lie to you. I can't really eat this, but it's also true that you prepared this amazing meal or whatever it is that they did. And that's just that again goes to that what feels appropriate. How do I deliver this?
Yeah. How, I mean, we, it's a little bit in that vein, but how does, whether it's speaking the truth or maybe withholding truth or kind of feeling that moment of where you're deciding in that how to be discerning and if you are going to share and how much you're going to share, how does it feel or show up like in your body? Is it like some tension? Is it just like for me, for instance, it's definitely like kind of get that weird feeling in my stomach where I'm just kind of like I don't I feel like I feel fidgety. Like I feel like ugh, I feel like I'm not being I'm not holding myself to my own integrity of being honest and truthful because now there's something I need to say that's sitting in there. And this could be simple as like, you know, group projects in a MBA environment are quite fascinating and things. And sometimes there's misfires in groups. I promised myself I would be more honest in these environments and, speak up when things are not like being done in a fair or communicative way. And I found myself doing that recently and I did it faster than I've ever done it. Not so I didn't even wait until later on to talk. I brought it up in the moment as soon as it happened. I was like, hey, like I'm confused. Like I approached it from I don't understand why this is happening. Could you explain it to me? Because I thought we were doing this. And I know it took people off guard and I know they were very uncomfortable with it. But I'm finding the balance between okay, like I didn't like the way that sat with me by just letting it go. So I chose to say something.
Mm, I've never thought about that before. I'd probably say general overall like tension if
Mm,
I'm not
yeah.
really sure what to say, or maybe how to say something the right way. It's like there's a tension that I feel. Um, I tend to hunch anyway, just from a physical standpoint. But something that I notice about myself is like if I'm uncomfortable, especially if it's someone of authority or someone I respect, I tend to hunch in almost like a uh, what's the word? Like I'm unaware that I'm exhibiting this body language of deference to them
Interesting.
because I don't want to hurt them or like I respect them. So like having this challenging discussion like is weird to me because I'm like, I really like this person has taught me a lot or something. It's like I don't want to disagree with them. So and it's weird to say that because like I can say I'm unaware of this because in the moment I'm not thinking about it. It's only in hindsight actually that think I realize I do that and from pictures because I can see pictures of
Uh,
myself, which is a weird thing to say, but I can see pictures of myself and then I can remember that event or that moment or the person I was talking to. And I think with time, that's how I've learned that I do that. I try to make myself less imposing or maybe less sort of aggressive looking, if that makes sense. Uh, so, and actually, you know what? I'll tell you, I think where some of that comes from now that we're talking about this is I have been told in the past, this is not more of a recent thing, um, but I have been told in the past that I exhibit both in the way my facial expressions are, and then I think in the way I talk, there's an intimidation factor and like an aggression factor that I think people tend to pick up when they don't
hmm.
know me. And that can rub people the wrong way. That can make people not want to like approach me, what have you. But I will say this, I won't say 100%, but in almost every case where someone tells me that, but then they've gotten to know me after, they're surprised by the complete 180 that they experience when they realize, oh, yeah, you're not like that at all. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing it on purpose. like, so some of that is probably some sort of posturing that I'm doing that I'm not aware of, right? And that's so when someone doesn't know me, that's the impression they're getting. And then I wonder if that's kind of gotten in the back of my head and that's where some of that deference comes from where I almost try to be less imposing because I'm like, oh, I don't want this person to think that. Like I'm not arguing with them because I don't like them or I think they're ridiculous or whatever. It's like I just like having conversations about tough stuff. And I think that candor is always the best option. And let's be honest, we're saying it. That makes a lot of people uncomfortable. And I can
It
see
does.
how, especially like in a work setting, you've known me at work for a long time. We both know how there's a lot of people that if you're just straight up honest about, like, yeah, this is just how it is, that doesn't sit well with a lot of people. And then all of a sudden you become well, that person, she speaks very aggressively. That's not okay. And it's like, no, no, she just told you the truth and you didn't like it.
It's so true. It's so true. It's like all these, I mean, going back to like it, if somebody has a reaction, it says a lot more as long as it was delivered correctly. And I talked about this in my feedback episode, which is going to be out soon. But uh, if you've said it correctly and you've said it politely, how it's received is not on you anymore. But at the end of the day, so many people don't know how to process and hear things that make them feel uncomfortable. And then blame the source of that discomfort instead of understanding that there's some take home message that's being missed.
Yeah, there's always something at the risk of like overanalyzing every single conversation or reaction that you have, like there's always something on the receiver. If you're the receiver of something, like there's always something on your end you can take away from that about how you reacted, how you responded, whatever it is. Um, and I don't know. And I just go back to even, and this is hard to do. I still think I struggle with this. For as much as I'm willing to like be, let's say, candid with other people, there's also a conversation we haven't really had about being honest with yourself.
But yeah, I was about to go there, but we can
Okay.
let's go there.
It's like, all right, here, let's go down this rabbit hole. And so if you have a conversation like that and something makes you uncomfortable, someone tells you a hard truth, it's equally as difficult to be honest with yourself. Like, oh man, like, yeah, I reacted poorly to that. Or, you know, I didn't like it. I mean, she was kind of a dick about it, but I needed to hear it. You know, that's hard to do.
It is.
And in
There
some ways might be more uncomfortable than receiving it from another person. It's more uncomfortable to tell yourself, like, yeah, man, like, you kind of needed to hear that.
yeah. I mean, it requires a tremendous amount of self-regulation to be able to hear something, whether it's from yourself or others, but then like sit with it honestly and process what does that actually mean, and what is my perception of what truth is in that statement, whether it's from myself or someone else, and arrive at like, okay, like that sucks, I didn't mean to do that. And if you have, it's fairly common if it's something that's been repetitive too, you're probably going to beat yourself up even more about it because you're like, shit, it's still happening, like I'm still doing it. And it's like, I think there's something I've definitely learned in the last year, maybe more so in the last 6 to 8 months. I feel like I've had to develop a lot more self-compassion for myself, because I think inevitably through my life experiences, I have determined I am very hard on myself, and I have a high bar for myself. And then I don't meet that bar and I criticize myself. No one has to get there. I'll trust me, I beat you there. And but it's not, and on the one hand it makes me an incredibly driven person, and I'm able to juggle the things that I can and succeed in the things that I put my mind to, but because of that particular skill. But at the same time, sometimes when things don't go well, I beat myself up and I don't have any self-compassion. And I've had to learn to build that self-compassion, because at the end of the day, like, more often than not these days, I'm the one who's finding truths out about myself and being like, well, that didn't age well. And I guess we're going to have to change that. And as I discover these things in the course of therapy, it's like, well, I don't want to continue beating myself up about it because I had no control over the things that happened to me. And the power that I have now is I'm aware. And so now it is my responsibility to do something about it. And so I've had to find that self compassion for the things that I didn't know any better. And now I'm going to try to be better. But through that is like acknowledging that some of those truths, more often than not lately, are truths that I'm finding out about myself that are directed to myself. And then I'm just like, okay, well, I'm sorry I was such a crappy sister. I That sucks. I'll have to live with that, and I'm going to move forward, because I it's not like I did it with malicious intent.
And what may have been true then doesn't have to be true now. And if you're honest with yourself, that is one of the first steps to growth, to evolving, to changing, to rewriting your story, however you want to look at it. You know, what was true then doesn't have to be true now. Sometimes that's a good thing. people close to me in my life tell me that, hey, like you can do better. Not that that necessarily happened in your case, but it's like whatever uh catalyst there was for that, if you're honest with yourself, then you can grow, you can change. And sometimes you need to, and you say, hey, like, shoot, back when I was in my 20s, I could stay out till 4 a.m. playing in the band and, you know, 6 PBRs back. And it's like now I can't do that anymore. Like I have to be honest with myself there too. It's like it was true then, not necessarily a good idea still at that time, but it was true then that I could sort of weather the consequences. And it's not true now that I can't anymore, or it's true now that I can't anymore. So without that self reflection, then almost in a way, without the self reflection, you're relying on other people to tell you. And as you mentioned, if you're letting other people define your narrative or what other people think, that's a slippery slope. And so, even if people are correct, you want to have a good circle of advisors that will tell you the truth and have your best interest. But you have to also be honest with yourself.
And I mean, arguably that is the hardest part. I think it's easier at points to accept what others may have to say about you, but especially if, you are hard on yourself and, you are your own worst critic, the hardest person to hear that stuff from is yourself and be like, well, okay, I'll have to sit and process that. And the old me would have heard it, been like, cool, put it in a box, put it away, compartmentalize that real quick and not process it. Then I'd say not necessarily the new and improved me, but the healing me is being like, okay, I'll look at this thing that kind of makes me kind of uncomfortable. I'll understand why it's making me uncomfortable. It may still go in a box because I'm high functioning and I have to get through my day, but it didn't go in there without some intention, and it's going to come out eventually too at some point.
And I'll add one layer to that you're talking about is you are also vocalizing that. Think of how many people are hard on themselves in the way that you are, that I am, but they're uncomfortable like telling their spouse that. It's like, hey man, like you need to cool it on your temper. And that might be true, but then why not just also confess to spouse in this example? Like, I have a really hard time with this because I beat myself up over this all the time and it makes me feel worse. It's like I'm feeling shame for the anger I feel over the frustration. It's like this rabbit hole of being upset with your emotions that you have about the emotions. It's just like, just again, right? Just be honest about that.
Yeah.
And how many people keep that in?
And that's when it kind of bottles up and kind of ends up feeling like, I think I was reading some piece of article or information that was mentioning that a lot of, even autoimmune and health related things can sometimes be like rooted in some sense of suppression of those emotions and not processing those things, processing those truths.
Yeah.
Not necessarily obviously all of them, but like there are some very psychosomatic type things that present in the human body. And I know for me, like anxiety is a huge one. Like I know already when I'm not being comfortable with myself because I'm starting to feel a little nauseous. And I was like, okay, something's happened. What happened? Because I probably wasn't paying attention. And I try to look back at what's happened in the last period of time and being like, okay, oh, okay, that was it. Yeah, I should have said something.
This is sort of relates to the bot, like the physical, the body question, but I can relate to that in that I I notice it in like finding distractions. It's like
Mm,
if I'm uncomfortable with something, either, someone said, something I'm like not processing well, like I don't notice it so much in a physical like feeling, but I can tell there's something there because I'm finding distractions. And then I sort of feel like discombobulated. I'm like, well, why am I discombobulated? And why am I distracting myself? And like, that's, oh, there's something you're not dealing with.
Mhm.
There's a
There is
there's a conversation you're not having.
there's a lot of clues once you start noticing those little things and you're like, "Oh, I didn't know I did that when I feel like that." I think I pointed out to someone like, arms crossed. There's a lot of body language related things that
Yeah.
they'll tell you as well for like relationships. But then even something as simple as like just getting really quiet and kind of shutting down, hunched over, like those are all signs of
Good
something's
at that one.
happening.
Be, have you known about I don't know what you would call it, but if you're in a conversation with somebody or you're watching a conversation between two people, look at the way that their shoulders are squared against each other or not.
I have heard one, I think it was like if it's straight on, it's more of a like conflict based. And if it's like angled, they're like more collaborative. Is that, or am I off base there?
You might be true on that. So
Okay.
I that's not exactly where I was going. So, but that might be true. I look at it as, and I notice it in myself a lot. If I'm trying to get out of a conversation quickly, I have one foot towards the exit. It's like I'm signaling that, like, okay, finish up, because like I either don't care, I don't want to hear this, like I got somewhere to be. And I notice it in like the stance that you're in.
Mm,
But that person doesn't want to be in that conversation for whatever reason, right? That might not be obvious why, but um, that's a fun one.
that's a good tell. Eye contact is also another really good tell. Granted, I mean, eye contact does make people uncomfortable in general, but like sustained lack of eye contact, I think is a fairly clear signal.
Yeah, the eye contact one is interesting because it also can, like you said, go the other way. Like if you're just really like zeroed in on somebody, I don't really know what that says, but that's a whole nother, like, I guess maybe there's an intimidation thing there.
Maybe. I definitely know of people who will do that, but they're so visibly otherwise engaged based on their other parts of their body language that tell me that that's just their way of being hyper focused on me. Um, so I mean, there are so many, but then again, even in the context of body language, so much of that is still subjective. And so like this is where like still I'll go back to what you mentioned earlier. It's just like just verbalize like, hey, like, yeah, I can chat for a bit, but I gotta go in like 10 minutes. So that your body is angled and you're sending all the other cues in the right way and it's not taken personally like, oh shit, Jared really doesn't want to talk to me.
I'm so glad you said that because I am so guilty of this. And that is exactly the way out of it. Is you just go in the nicest way possible. It's like, hey, just so you know, like I have something I have to do in 5 minutes. So I want to hear your story. Just know, like, I'm capped a little bit, right? Like it's just being honest.
Just
And it,
provide the story, otherwise I'll write my own stories. Like shit, I just Jared really didn't want to talk to me. Like I guess he must be really annoyed at me.
yeah, it's like no, no, no. I want to hear. Just know. Give me the abbreviated version, and then when I'm done, like you can give me some more details. And then it's like, okay, cool. We just cleared the air. Like we don't need to. There doesn't need to be all this animosity here, you know. And then I don't also need to be like subtly trying to send you signs of, oh no, I gotta get out of here, you know.
Yeah, like looking at your clock.
I also, I know we're far afield truth here, but I like I know the other thing I notice is I think I got this from some of the customer service training I've had, but have you seen or talked about like mirroring? Like when you're in
Yes.
conversation with people,
Yes.
I swear to God, I'll go like, God, it could be at the bank, and the teller goes and like leans on their left arm, and I will lean on my right arm to match the lean, and I catch myself doing it, and I'm like, you're hopeless, dude. And like I don't know if the other person is even like aware of this, but I see it now all the time where I'm like, you need to stop. And I like, it will intentionally change my position to be like,
Stubbornly.
cut this out.
I mean, there are things that, I mean, if anyone has been in customer service, like, how many times when I was selling a ticket at the box office because I worked at a movie theater, obviously I'd say like, enjoy your show. Um, and they would go. And then how often now when I buy tickets and then they're like, enjoy the show. And I'm like, oh, thank you. You too. And I'm like, no, why? You're not going anywhere. You're working. And I called out attention to the fact that you're still working. I'm sorry.
And it throws you off guard even more when you do that. And you're like, oh shit, like that makes no sense. And then the person goes, well, I will. I'm seeing it on Friday. And you're like, okay.
It's like, yeah, I and even sometimes the usher, I'm like, okay, they're like, enjoy the movie. I'm like, thank you, you too. Like, no. Then people would
Being
do it to me
human.
though when I would sell them tickets, and I would say like, enjoy the movie, and they're like, oh, thank you, you too, and they would feel super embarrassed. I'm like, don't worry about it.
It's good. Just keep
Just
going.
keep going.
Go get the popcorn.
Let's
We're
go for
good.
it. We're good.
I can't think of any at Apple. I'm sure there are plenty, but I can't think of any weird ones there. People would just tell the thing with Apple was people would just were very candid, actually, especially because you not always, but you would stumble sometimes upon like very personal pictures or a family member passed and it might be on their desktop. And so then they just start telling you about this person.
Ah,
And it, it just is. You just have to kind of roll with it. And it taught you a lot of empathy and humility, I think. And people would just come in and share their stories. And actually, I would say, and I think if there's anybody out there listening that worked at Apple, I would argue that was what made that job so fun when you're reflecting back on it, was it wasn't playing with the technology. It was feeling like you really got to know people. And then when you would do something for them to help them out or you'd fix a problem, whatever it was, there was genuine like happiness. And
hmm.
you were like, huh, that's why I put up with all the people that are assholes, is for this one person.
I get it. I get it. Well, we've taken the conversation in quite a different couple different ways,
Yeah, that was a
but
tangent. Apologize.
no, it's fine. Um, Here now at the top of the hour, what is at the root of truth for you, Jared?
Hmm. I was prepared for this question. So I'll answer this if I can, if I have time for one story. Um, Friend of mine, there was one day that we were out, him and his wife, and then me and mine, and it's it started out with sort of, I think it started out frankly as like a political argument, and sort of escalated into more sort of ephemeral philosophical stuff as things tend to do when I'm involved. And this individual is almost, at least at the time, I should say this was a few years ago, so to give him credit, this could have changed. But at the time, it was just like a very, very, very skeptical person and skeptical of everything. And so I would say something like, just to be silly, like the moon landing is real. And he's like, but what if it isn't? And I'm sure we've all had someone in our lives who's just like questions everything. And after a while, you're like, come on, man, like, you you got to believe in something, whatever it is. And so we were kind of having this circular discussion. And I think that skepticism is healthy and everybody should have it. But after a while I started asking him, I was like, dude, like, if you think that everything is a psyop, or that the stuff you learned about, let's say, science is fabricated to make us believe something, then like what is it that you believe in? Where are you basing this from? What foundation are you standing on that is true for you, where you're writing off, let's just say, modern life, right? Like, and he couldn't answer the question. And that's what bothered me the most about the whole conversation, was not kind of maybe how ridiculous I thought some of his beliefs were. It was more just like, you're just being skeptical for the sake of being skeptical. Like, where are you coming from? Because I'm at least can tell you, even if what I believe is wrong, where I got it,
Mm-hmm.
who told me that, who taught me that, what my lived experience was, whatever, right? So why am I telling the story? I think it's because this may be one of the few topics on your podcast where I think the answer is there isn't a route to truth. I think that truth is the root. It is a fundamental. And whether you mean big T truth, something objective, empirical, the sky is blue, something like that, or you mean little T truth, a lot of what we've been discussing, like your perspective, the frame that you view the world, it's fundamental. It's fundamental to human experience. So I think control, forgiveness, expectations, all the shows that you've done, the conversations you've had, I think truth underpins all of them. I mean, if you have the four cardinal virtues and all the other virtues stem from those, I think you've got truth at the bottom in the soil. I mean, truth is the soil, and maybe a couple other things, and everything sort of grows from that.
Damn, how the heck do I follow that up? I do resonate with a lot of what you're saying. And what my answer is going to be, I don't actually think drastically changes with that lens, and actually maybe even supports that lens. Because I would actually say that at the root of truth is context. I think that whether it is lowercase t, capital case T, at the end of the day, it's somebody's context. It's their context of their worldview. And for me, as the receiving party, whether it's of somebody else's truth or my own truth, it's context for me to use as however I will. And to understand that that context is perspective on how to take maybe this person's actions or their words and reframe it if needed. So, and I do believe very firmly in that having knowledge is power. And I kind of see truth as a form of knowledge. And therefore, it's in some sense, it's context at the end of the day.
I think that metaphor works nicely because you could, if you want to use the soil example, there's obviously nutrients that every plant needs to grow, but you get very different flora in different environments in different soils. Where you live and where I live are two very, very different places. And if you look at truth as context, then yeah, the context matters. The quality of the soil matters. And it will change the outcome. Sometimes for the better. Doesn't always mean it's bad, but 100%.
Yeah. So I think it still supports truth being at the core. But I think if I put a framework around it, it would be its context. So I still think they work actually pretty well together. As even though yours has a root, I think the packaging still kind of works as a harmonious perception of truth. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, Jared. I bet it went in directions you didn't expect it to.
No, I have my notebook here with like 4 answers to your first question, and then you hit me with the childhood one. And I was like, damn, that's like the one I didn't answer.
I gotta keep you on your toes. This is meant to be organic. You can prepare only to a certain degree.
Yeah, fair
So,
enough. I was prepared for what was it? What feels alive to you about truth right now or something?
uh,
I had like a whole thing on that, and then it's like, oh shit. So we'll just have to part two.
yeah, I mean, but no doubt they'll, I mean, little does our audience know you'll be back sooner than we expect. So, uh, thanks so much for being on, Jared. And for our audience, if you have any other topics that came to mind that it'd be great to have Jared on to talk about, leave them in the comments below. But we'd like to thank you so much, Jared, for your time today, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thanks for having me. And um, if we get to do the next one the way I'm thinking, I'm looking forward to it, and everyone's hopefully in for a good treat.
Appreciate that. Awesome.